Hi, welcome to the BYU-Idaho Tutoring Center videos. The topic of today's video is fossils, specifically the fossil record, how we date fossils, and really just how the fossil record helps us document life's early history. And so this is again going to be going back to macroevolution, which just shows the changes in species and alleles and populations over long periods of time. And the fossil record is what really helps us see these changes over really big periods of time. So the fossil record is useful because it helps us trace the earliest forms of life. We can look back at the fossil record and see when life first originated. And it also lets us explore evolutionary history over billions of years because we can trace organisms and species throughout time and how they generally slowly changed to become new species. And so some things to keep in mind about fossils is that fossils tend to be richest in sedimentary rocks. So that's where we find them the most. And sedimentary rocks, there's three main types of rocks if you've never taken geology. And sedimentary rocks are the ones that are made up of the broken pieces of other of the types of rocks. And they form these layers when they are lithified or turned into rocks. And these different layers are called strata. They're the layers between different rocks. And we tend to find the fossils within those layers. This isn't the only place we find fossils. Some other examples are we can find mammals preserved in ice or in other things such as tree sap. But again, fossils we tend to find in sedimentary rocks. That's the main reservoir for them. So the fossil record is really useful because it shows us differences. It shows us that the fossils and the things and the species that lived a long time ago are different ones for the ones today. And so that really just is further support for evolution. Keep in mind though that the fossil record is incomplete, and that's for a number of different reasons. One is not every species or organism that ever lived was able to die in the right place so that it was able to be preserved. And a lot of the fossils that may have been created may have been destroyed now because of geological processes and things. And then lastly, not all the fossils that have ever been made have been discovered. We're still constantly finding them and adding them to our ongoing fossil record. And so because of these things, the fossil record is kind of biased or favors certain types of species. So the fossil record favors species that existed for a long time. If your species existed for a really long time, you have a greater chance of being made into a fossil. It also favors species that were abundant and widespread. So if we're a large area and there's a lot of you, then again there's a higher chance that you were able to be preserved as a fossil. And then the last thing is that the fossil record favors hard-shelled species. It's easier to fossilize those and they're less likely to be degraded. So, and then just lastly, keep in mind that we are constantly filling gaps in our fossil record because we're constantly making new discoveries of new fossils and we're adding them in to the gaps that we have. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how we date fossils. So a lot of times we want to know how old our fossil is so that we can put it on a timeline or a scale. And so one way we can do that is with relative age. We know that lower rock strata are older and higher up rock strata are younger because they stack on top of each other as time progresses. And so we can say, okay, if we find something in this strata, we know that it is going to be older than something that's in this strata. But sometimes that's not good enough and we want something more precise. And so that's where absolute dating comes into play. But be wary of the word absolute. It doesn't mean that we have pinpointed how old this thing is on the very year. It's pretty general on the scale of tens of thousands to millions of years, a range of when it was probably around. So the way that we do this is with radiometric dating, and radiometric dating relies on radioactive isotopes and their half-lives. So radioactive isotopes are elements that are unstable, and so they will decay into a more stable element or a daughter isotope or something else. And they usually decay at a constant rate. And so we're able to track this rate and we know how long it takes for half of that material to decay. And so that's what a half-life is the amount of time it takes for half of the parent isotope to decay into the daughter product. And so different isotopes have different half-lives. Carbon-14, for example, has a relatively short half-life of only 5,730 years, whereas things like uranium-238 have really large half-lives, such as 4.5 billion years. And so for different things, we use different half-lives depending on the relative age of it. And so just make sure, you've probably already learned about half-lives, but just don't get confused. Remember, it's how much it takes for half of it to decay. So the first half-life of something, for it to decay to 50%, it would take its half-life. But then that same amount of time, it would go down to 25%, and then 12.5, and then 6 whatever that is. And so be careful that you don't think, oh, first half-life it goes to 50, next half-life it goes to 0, because that's incorrect. It's half of what you have when you start. And so this kind of brings us, what are some challenges that we sometimes have with dating fossils? Well, the first is that a lot of times we're dating, or in biology we're dating living things, and so the isotopes that are present in living things, usually it's mainly carbon that we're dealing with. And so carbon is a good isotope when we're dating younger things, but if we're getting back into the billions of years, then by the time we get to billions of years, all the carbon-14 has decayed, and so we can't use that isotope anymore. So a lot of times what we have to do is we have to use other isotopes that are older to date the rocks that are around the fossil, because they contain some of these older isotopes that we can use to date. And so sometimes we have to use an indirect method where we date the strata above and below a certain fossil and then kind of guesstimate where and how old that is. So for example, if we have this fish fossil that we're trying to date, and we're able to use radiometric dating to find that the strata above it is 525 million years old, and the strata below it is 535 million years old, we can guess that this fossil is about 530 million years old. It's not exact, but it's probably pretty close. Some other things that can sometimes help us are magnetism. The Earth's magnetism has changed, and that is relevant, or it shows up in our rock record as different rocks and things will point in different directions, and so that just helps us verify things as well. So the last thing that we need to keep in mind is that the fossil record helps us see the evolution or the origin of new groups of organisms. So we're able to see an organism's structure of its body based on its skeleton that existed a long time ago, and then something that is kind of similar to it that we see nowadays. And by looking in the fossil record, sometimes we can find these other transitional fossils or species that show how one organism eventually was able to change into different groups of organisms. And so that's really helpful when we're studying macroevolution, and that is some evidence that we have for evolution. So I hope this was helpful. In other videos, I'm going to get more into life history on Earth and how we use these fossils and fossil record to understand where life originated and things like that. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.